Hello, welcome to Activating Magic. I'm here with Tania Vasallo. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Darla. I'm so excited that we're doing this.
Me too. So I've introduced everybody to you, and I'm really excited to dive in. And as I was reading your bio, I was remembering back to our conversation when we connected in person in California, and you speaking about the patriarchy and your desire to transform what's available for women on this planet. And you're doing that through your podcast, The Courage to Be, and helping women make money. We really connected in the idea of hosting retreats because that's something we're both so passionate about. But I want to start with your story about why the focus on women and, how your background has influenced you to be really passionate about this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Spain. My dad's Spanish, my mom's American, just to have a little bit of context with that. And so I was born at the end of Franco's dictatorship. So Spain at that time was very patriarchal. It still is. I think there's a lot of remnants. We've done great strides. We've moved forward with a lot of things in these last 40 years. But yes, having a very patriarchal society and then a very patriarchal family because my dad's seven brothers and one sister, and she's the youngest. So it was just like double compounded on there. But then I had my mom being American, more of that freedom, that opportunity to be able to, because I have the double nationality, to be able to come and work here in the States. I consider these are my two countries, the US and Spain. And so I've had the opportunity to live here in the US where there was a lot more freedoms for me to grow my business as a woman. And I don't think I kind of it came to a conclusion with this. I was kind of soul searching for myself years ago when I was restarting my business because I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I consider myself multi-passionate. So I'm sure many of your listeners can identify with this. Like I've got all the degrees that you can imagine on the planet, in self-development. Like I've studied with Jack Canfield, with Louise Hay, landmark education, Coach like every certificate that you can think of, I've gathered, and I've done it. And so I did that, but previously, before that career got started, I was an art director in New York City working for multi-million dollar accounts like Starbucks and Samsung and AT&T. It just didn't align with it got to a point it didn't align with my values. And I'm like, okay, let's branch out, let's leave corporate. But then I was at the space of like, well, what's my purpose, and what should I be focusing on? I have all these passions and I have all these different careers. Should I go back to art direction and photography? Should I be a life coach? Because I had also been training in the early 2000s before anyone was even a coach, so it's like, what should I do, with my life? And I think that's where the soul searching started. And when you're going through that process, of just like acquiring, what are my talents? What's my experience? What's my, why was I born in Spain to a Spanish father and American mother? Why was I born in a time of patriarchy? So I think all of those things that seemed kind of like out of focus in a big blur just started getting focused little by little. And then it just all aligned. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I was born in Spain at that time with a Spanish dad, an American mom. Patriarchy, like men are always the unspoken language, because it wasn't really stated, but it was always kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for in English? Like insinuated that the successful people were the men in my family, including my dad, my uncles, and the women were there to kind of serve them. Take care of the kids, take care of the men in your life, and in exchange, you will be taken care of. So in a way, also what wasn't said was a man is your financial plan, and so it's like, it was years ago that I started investigating that too and getting curious, like, well, what
Mm.
is my relationship to money? Can I be as successful as my dad and my uncles? Can I make money on my own? What is my relationship to money? Or am I just waiting for the men in my life to take care of me? So that's where it all kind of came into focus. And I was like, yes, I'm here to serve women and for our voices to be heard and to know that we can do it as well as men or better, and it's not even a comparison. It's just that's the path that I've followed and I've found myself. And that if I could do it, I can inspire other women to do it too, that have felt oppressed in any way, whether it's by being a woman, by being Hispanic, by being Native American, by, whatever the
Yeah.
minority is.
So I grew up in a small town, and all I wanted was to get a good job and make money and, make my own way. It was like I wanted to get out of the small town. And I didn't really realize that there were any barriers being a woman, right? So I went to engineering school, I got a job in corporate, and I'm like, working my way up the ladder. And I think it took starting my personal development journey really to start to understand that these dynamics and energies and the things that I had overcome without even realizing it. And I'm curious, when you were art directing, did you run into that at all? What was that like for you? Like, was there a moment where you decided you needed to leave to either make more money or to be more respected?
It's a great question. You're always so intuitive and knowing what questions to ask or which direction to take. I haven't been asked that question in a long time. Like I haven't gone into that space energetically. But it's interesting that you ask about it because if I reflect back now, and this was over 20 years ago, I remember our creative department. There were maybe, I want to say like 1,000 people working at this ad agency, and our creative department was made out of maybe 30, 40 people. And out of those 40 people, I want to say only 10% were women. The
Wow.
rest were men.
Wow.
And the way it works in advertising is that they paired us up, art director with copywriter. And so we were a team and we'd have to come up with ideas and concepts for these multi-million-dollar accounts, and just come up with a campaign for them. And I always got paired up with men. There were a couple teams of just women. If not, the other few ladies that were there were paired up with men too. But I was like, I always wanted to be with another woman. I've been surrounded by, well, here's another thing. I've been surrounded by men my entire life, from my dad's uncles, they were very dominant. And then get this, at age 3, when my sister was born, I think I have to tell this story, but when she was born, they were expecting a boy. They even
Mm.
had a name for her, which was going to be Sergio. There were no sonograms at that time or whatever to know the sex of the child. And so out came a girl, and they were like, I think I must have interpreted as a 3-year-old, 2.5-year-old, that my dad was disappointed, that they wanted a boy. And so I started acting and behaving like a boy from there on forward until my teenage
Mm.
years. And so I always got, like I even peed standing up, I'd copy my cousin, older cousin, because I'm the oldest of me and my sister. And I would only play with like cars and Playmobiles. Like I wouldn't touch a doll. I was such a tomboy, and so I was surrounded once again with just boys and men, as I was getting older. It didn't change until I was in my teenage years. And then that was like, no, let me get back into my femininity. And I'm here as a woman, as a girl at that point. But so that's important to state because now I'm at this ad agency and there's not really that many women to work with, but I want to work with women, but I kept getting paired up with men. And I even requested it at one point to work with some other women. I did work with one or two other females for a little bit and it was great. But what I felt, so there wasn't so much of like, oh, I have to climb the ladder, or, there's not enough women. That wasn't there yet for me, like
Mm.
that knowledge. It was more the lack of freedom. And even though this agency, they were there, when you're in the creative departments, there's a lot of freedom. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
clock in. We'd come in at 10, as long as you deliver, the projects on time. There was a lot of freedom. We could go concept down to, the different coffee shops, or go on
Mhm.
an excursion somewhere. So it wasn't really a strict clock in at 9, leave at 5. You had a good amount of freedom for being a corporate, but I still felt constricted. And what took me over the tipping point with the agency was the fact that I was working for some accounts, some in pharma, some other, I'm not going to say the names of it because I don't really want to, but we had to come up with a campaign for health and wellness for a cookie company. That's all I'll leave it at. I was like, seriously? Like, this just does not align with me. Like, I wasn't a mom at that time, but they wanted us to sell like these, less calorie packs to moms, and position it as a health and wellness. So that was one thing I got put on. And then the other one was a pharmaceutical account for hepatitis C. And I just, like, these people didn't even have the salaries to pay for these kind of treatments. So it got to a point, it wasn't aligned with my values. So
Mm.
the lack of freedom, I just wanted to be a freelancer. I didn't want to have to report to anyone. I wanted to
Yeah.
be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want. So I was like, well, let me go become a life coach. And I want to freelance as a life coach, and I want to freelance as an art director, and I want to freelance as a photographer, and just do me with all my different aspects of me. So that's what took me out of corporate and wanting to keep on searching.
Let's bring in the idea of magic here. So for me, magic is your inner knowing, your divine guidance. Was there, I know you're super magical. I know you lead retreats. I know your intuition fires for your clients and helps you to guide them. Was that present then?
It's always been present. And I feel like I've always been very connected to my intuition, but I was just I feel like I was in the baby stages. Like, I was learning how to crawl, like, I didn't
Yeah.
really understand it, because I do consider myself, like, I've had a really magical life, like, it's whatever I've wanted to do. I set the goal, I put the trust, I follow my intuition, it's like, well, what do I want next? It's not feeling good. Okay, well, what do you want? And then it's like, I want to leave corporate. So we left corporate. And then my husband left corporate too. And we're like, oh, let's go to photo school together, and we went to photo school. And then after that, it's like, well, what do we do? Do we come back and live in the city, or do we want to go live somewhere else? And we're like, let's try Spain, because I'd never worked in Spain. I'd only
Mm.
been there all the way up to college. And we're like, okay, let's go to Spain. He didn't even speak Spanish. That was a brave move on his part too. So, and it's been like that my whole journey, but I don't think I was as in tune to it back then
Mhm.
as I am now. It's like, now I listen much more clearly to my intuition. I trust a lot more, of like, even with the big steps of just like, no, that's showing up. Something's pulling you in that direction. Just go, follow, trust, and see what shows up from it.
What does it feel like? I saw you go, oh, it's pulling. Like, talk to me about your experience of when you know.
Yes, it definitely comes in the solar plexus, like in the belly area, and then in the heart, you start feeling the butterflies. And then if I don't allow my brain to, the critter brain, to try and keep you safe and sound all the alarms of why you shouldn't do that, because the critter brain just doesn't want
Yeah.
you to change. But yeah, it starts, I feel it in my body, I feel it in my belly, I feel it in my heart. It gets me excited. It's kind of like that. It's almost like that feeling like when you fall in love, you're starting to date someone, you feel like those butterflies. That's the kind of feeling I get,
Mm.
when I'm seeing that I'm on the right path.
Tell me about a recent time you've had that feeling.
Oh my God. Well, yes, let me see how far back I want to go with this. In 2012, I watched a TED Talks with my husband of this amazing school called the Green School in Bali. It's rated in the top 3 schools on sustainability in the planet. It's all made out of bamboo, no walls. And we didn't even have a kid at that point. And as soon as we finished watching the TED Talks, we're like, wow, that place looks amazing. Too bad we don't have kids, because that would be an amazing school for ourselves as adults to go to. The people are running around barefoot, it's like it's in the middle of the jungle. And I was like, okay, I don't have kids, but there was that butterfly feeling of like, one day I'm gonna go to Bali. There's a pool for me to go to Bali. And I've never been anywhere in Asia, so I was like, one day I'll get there, and it wasn't on the radar. It wasn't my radar, but the year after I got pregnant. And so I was like, now I have a child. And so my focus hasn't been on that. It's been on other responsibilities and things, with life, until this last year that we had to start looking for middle schools for her. And
Mm.
that feeling came back from 12 years ago of like, middle schools. Let me go look up that school, like a thought was planted in my head. I'm like, well, what if we went to Bali? And I brought it up with the family. And at first there was a yes, then there was a, oh my God, no, like we'd have to rent the house, and there's too much to do, and it's too uncertain, and it's almost too complicated. So we kind of dropped it. And now it's also a family decision. It's not so like, if it were just me by myself, it'd be easier. So you have to kind of have these conversations. But I kept holding space for it, of just like, I see myself there. I don't know why. I see myself. And it's
Had
funny
you
how this,
been at this point?
no, I've never been to Bali. I've never been to Asia. And I brought this up with and every time that I'd hear someone go to Bali, I'd be like, how was it? It's always been a dream of mine to go to Bali. And if I could go to the school, this would be amazing. And I shared that with my hairdresser at one point. And she's like, well, I kind of get, like with your husband too, like if he's not wanting to move, pick up and move everything. She's like, why do you guys have to leave for like a whole year? Maybe just go for 3 months, as soon as the school year is done, and go for 3 months and go explore all that area of the world. And I'm like, you're right. Why am I complicating things? And so I kind of surrendered to that idea. I was like, it almost sounds easier, but we won't get the experience of that school, which is what triggered everything. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly how you thought of it. And it wasn't until the end of this year of 2024 that my husband just looked at me at one point. He's like, we're not getting any younger. And we haven't had an adventure in these last 12 years, since we've had my daughter, because him and I have traveled all over, lived in different cities. He's like, I think we're due for an adventure. What if we just go? And I'm like, oh my God, now you're starting the whole thing all over again. So the butterflies started all over, and it's just like this ebb and flow, of like,
Mm.
should we go in that direction? Should we not? And we're excited for this new adventure. And honestly, I'm in the midst of it right now, Darla, of like, what is next? Where's the uncertainty? Like having to trust again, like, will
Oh.
we be
Mm.
able to rent the house? What are we doing with our dogs? They don't allow pets in Bali, like there's all these uncertainties that I could easily check myself out of this new adventure, because it's hard, because it's complicated, because you have to get busy right now. There's uncertainty. But when I get into those moments, then I have to come onto podcasts like yours and connect with people that are all about magic and be like, no, I'm on the right track. We're all good.
It sounds amazing. I love that you saw that so many years ago. You didn't even have a child
I know,
and
how
thought, oh, we're
crazy.
going to do that.
I didn't even think, like, I'm like, well, we don't have a child, so we can't go to the school because it's for kindergarten to 12th grade. But maybe one day I'll go to Bali. Like there has been that
Yeah.
pull, and you see it if you're watching that it does
Yeah.
come from the solar plexus there. And honestly, I don't
Wow.
know it's like Steve Jobs used to say, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So maybe we should have another conversation 2 or 3 years from now and be like, why
Yes.
did you have to go there? What was the
Yes.
purpose?
I love that. Well, and you said, okay, I'm having to trust again. And as you say that, I'm thinking this isn't your first rodeo with trusting where you're pulled and not knowing why. Is that true?
It is. And it's so hard for me sometimes to trust, that's where I allow the brain to come in and going and the jib jatter, of just like, "Da, da, 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 why? Don't do this, don't do, and it's giving you it's sounding all the alarms. And you have to kind of calm your nervous system and just be like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You've done this before, and you kind of have to go back to it because even though I feel like trusting is just one of these things that maybe some people have it easier. Have you found that, Darla, that some people it's easier to trust, or maybe the bigger the dream or the bigger the intuitive hit,
Yeah.
you're like, no, we have to go back to trust because this sounds crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. So recognition magic is what I consider to be my primary, which is like seeing the trends and picking up the pieces or, the connections. And when you ask that, of like, I don't know that I would say I've seen a trend. It's like sometimes a really huge thing. Like when you're speaking about it, I can feel in my body like, oh my gosh, I want a big adventure. Like that sounds amazing. And when you're doing something so significant, so disruptive, like you have to let the pieces fall in place, I think, because if you're trying to control it all, that would be really challenging. But at the same time, sometimes trusting a little thing can be harder for people, right?
Hmm.
Oh, this is insignificant. Like, why do I have to pick A over B when B is like my routine? Why is it worth it to make that change? Whereas something big sometimes can seem, obviously, this is destined, where a small decision might feel like, is it really that big a deal? Do I really need to follow my guidance? So I think it can go either way.
Yeah, you're right. And as you're saying that, I think trust, you use the word control there. And I find myself, I straddle both of those, like I have to have things. And control is all it is. I'm very aware of it, it's fear, it's just this
Mhm.
fear in disguise. Or it's disguise as like control, like I'm very anal and I have to put things in place.
Yeah.
But deep down underneath, what's driving that is it's a fear of not trusting, because on the other side of fear is trust. If you're trusting, then there's no need to
Yeah.
control, so it's trying to find that middle ground, I guess.
I think our environment makes a huge difference too. So if it's a big decision, but now your husband's on board, so it's like you're not alone, you're not fighting against other energies to move in that direction. Sometimes a small change maybe is hard for someone if the people in their life really don't get it or it's going
Yeah.
to somehow affect them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's when the environment, like when my husband initially, he was like, yes. And then he was like, no, like it depended on the days, because it seemed like too, um, I think I was trying to control it by like, oh, well, maybe we should do a trip there first, because if we go there first, then he'll love it. Then I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, maybe if we only go 3 months, that's what we're supposed to do, instead of like, I don't know, like going deeper into the conversation. That it's been an interesting journey with that, to observe. Maybe I'll have a little bit more perspective with more time of
Yeah, I
like
can't wait.
how I went through it, of just like, oh, did I trust completely? Could I have had a deeper conversation with him? Like, what are your fears? Why don't you want to do it? Because I'm feeling a big pull for this,
Yeah.
and I just don't know why, like I really don't know why.
Takes a lot, I think, to speak that about that when you're not sure how it'll be received, or to enroll other people to change their life because you
Yeah.
have an intuition. I know I've caught myself in different times holding it back. I'm in an Airbnb right now in California, and I'm here for a few weeks, not like in California specifically. And it was a pull. And I knew I was going to do it like February, March. I have a friend out here who I'm visiting, and I really wanted to spend some time with her. And it, even though inside I knew I was going to do this, and my partner was invited, like, hey, do you want to come? You can come the whole time. You can come visit, however, whatever you want. Um, but I just went, or I just made the decision. But I found myself, even though I knew intuitively I would be taking the trip, I didn't book it and I didn't book it and I didn't book it because it felt like, oh, I should have a discussion and make sure it's okay that I'm following this wild hair to just go do this thing because now I'm in a partnership. And then one day, like we kept just not having time to have the discussion and I just booked it. And it felt really great. I mean, I knew I would be supported, right? Because that's the dynamic in our relationship. And it was funny to watch myself not say anything for a while, even though I knew there was no doubt I was coming here, you know?
I can totally relate to that, of just these knowings. It happened to me in January. I was supposed to go to a podcasting festival in Florida, and I kept waiting and waiting. Like in October, they were sending out the emails. I had gotten that ticket a year before, in January, the year before. And I kept waiting. I'm like, and I normally I get my plane tickets and hotel reservations with plenty of time. And I'm like, why is it October and I still haven't gotten the ticket? November, and I still hadn't gotten the ticket. And then at the end of November, someone reached out to me with a different event that was taking place in San Diego, as well as I needed to get some dental work that I did in Tijuana, Mexico. And I was like, oh, I'm pairing everything up. I'm writing it off. I'm doing, like there was something that I just didn't know what was the driving force that kept stopping me and stalling me with that decision. But I can totally relate with what you're saying. Like, and you might just take a little bit of time. For me personally, I think it might be a little bit of time to just kind of strategize, like, how am I going to present it? So it's in a way that everything flows nicely with the conversation of everyone
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah. I remember when we met, you were about to head to Spain and you were going without your husband at that time. So kind of similar.
Yep. I went with my daughter the whole summer. We spent 6 weeks there, or 5 weeks this summer. So
Yeah.
you just know, when what things are, that your partner might want to come or might not, or what's
Yeah.
on your own.
Yeah. Talk to me about what you see. So you work with clients on money magic, on increasing their income. What have you noticed in terms of where people trust their intuition or where they don't, and how it relates to their money?
That's such a great question, Darlene. I see sometimes when they're big money decisions and they really want something, their intuition is telling them, yes, go in that direction, buy yourself that plane ticket, go pay for that course or sign up that coach, or whatever it is that they, but if it's a big sum of money for them, because everything's perspective,
Mhm.
it's what's big for you might not be big for me, or vice
Yeah.
versa, right? But if they're feeling that it's a big decision, it's they'll feel it intuitively, and then that's when the brain kicks in. The amygdala kicks in and is trying to keep you
Mhm.
safe by stopping you. You might sense an opportunity, you're making this decision, but what comes right after making an important decision? Fear, what we just talked about before. The first thing that shows up when you're making an important decision, all the fears come in, but the fears get
Yeah.
triggered by the amygdala, by our reptilian brain. And so if you have and I try and explain this to my clients and remind myself too, because we're always making, bigger and bigger, leaps and
Yeah.
decisions with this as we're moving through life and we're growing in the process. But I try and explain, it's like the first thing is awareness. Where like something got presented to you, an opportunity to travel like you did to California, or you're signing up to like a new mastermind that's like double the most you've ever paid, or it's a trip, whatever it is. How are you feeling interiorly? Like, what are you feeling in your body? What's your intuition saying? Become aware. Like if you're aware and you're like, oh my God, it gives me the butterflies, I so want to go. Like for me with Bali, it's like I feel the butterflies. Yes, I want to go. But then what's the next thing that kicks in? Your brain, you have to understand how the brain works. The amygdala, which is the size of an almond, is in the back of our brain, and it's kept us safe for millions of years, and it made sense 1,000 years ago, when we were out, running in the jungle and the
Yeah.
lion shows up. But nowadays it's like fictitious safety, because it's like, okay, I want to go to California or I want to go to Bali, and I don't know why, but it feels good. I have that
Yeah.
awareness. It feels good. But your brain is going to, if you understand that, your brain's going to sound all the alarms, and it's going to give you all the reasons and the excuses why not to do it, to keep you safe. That's how it shows up. And so the third thing I'd say, and this is what I share with my clients, is lean in with someone else, an accountability partner, a mentor, a coach, a friend, a partner, a spouse, like whoever you need that can hold space for you and give you and debunk all those reasons and excuses that you have going on, like, and this happens to me right now, like this Bali thing is a perfect example. There's days that I might wake up overwhelmed and like, oh my God, I can't do it. Like, is this the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? And so I'll share with my husband. He's like, nope, we need to move
Yeah.
forward. Today we need to do this. And then other days it's reverse. He's the one waking up and I'm like the one holding the space. I'm like, no, we're on the right track. It's all gonna be okay. We've always figured it out. So I'd say that the steps for these are awareness, understanding of the brain, and then find someone that can hold that space for you so that you don't fall trapped to your own thinking.
It's such an important reminder because I think often people think that fear means I've made a bad decision.
So true, Darla. And
Like,
it's
what have
not.
I done? What am I doing? Have I lost my mind?
And based on that, that's a great point that you bring up. So you can ask yourself the following question. Am I making a decision based on my old patterns from the past and the fears from the past, or am I making a decision from my future self based on trust and possibility? Like that's two
Mhm.
different decision making.
Yes. And let's talk about retreats for a minute. I'm thinking of when you said, am I making the decisions from my old patterns? To me, this is one of the best things that can happen on retreat is we can recognize our old patterns and like there's a whole group of people that see it with us. And so it's harder to go back to the old pattern when you've been witnessed that you could actually do something new. And I know you're an excellent retreat host and you've transformed lots of lives and made lots of money from retreat. What's been your experience with that? Like helping people to really break through their old pattern of fear through retreat?
That's a great positioning of it, because I'd never thought of it from that perspective, but it is, you put yourself in an environment, going back to environment, like you were just
Yeah.
saying before, it's so important to put ourselves in those kind of environments, and especially when they're immersive, like 2, 3 days, 4 or 5 days, whatever it is, a week, because you get to go deeper. I mean, think about it. How many times a year, or when was the last time that you put yourself in that kind of environment where you're supported by like-minded people, where they can witness you, as well as having an expert or a facilitator like yourself, like me, whoever it is. I just came back from our retreat in January, people that are holding that space to pull you up, and so that you can grow as well as all the other participants that are getting to witness you and that growth and hold that space for you so that you can't revert backwards.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting. I'm curious if you're going to end up hosting retreats in Bali. I I personally have never been called to Bali. I know so many people who have gone, and I'm like, I'm sure there'll be a point where I'll feel the pull. And are you familiar with astrocartography, where you lay your planetary? It's oh, you might want to look into it and be curious what Bali has for you. But there's, our planets,
Oh,
the
like
way
the
they.
locations? Is that
Mhm.
what it refers to? Yeah, I didn't know the name of it. I've heard of it. I've never had it done, but tell me more about it.
Okay. Well, in my chart, Bali is one of the places where they say I'll feel really good there. And I've not been. So, but today, when you're speaking of it, I thought, oh, maybe Tanya will go scope it out and maybe it'll be time for me to go there, bring a group there. So
It's
just
so
putting that in the
interesting.
space.
Yes, you're picking, I'm telling you, you've always been so intuitive. I feel like you're picking up thoughts in here because for
Mm.
me, it's like, well, what's next with the business? Like what do I want to offer in Bali? Like how many hours do I want to work? Like I really
Yes.
want to design and be conscious of how, because I'm only there for a year, possibly two, if we're really liking the middle school, but then we'd be coming back. Like this is not just like, oh, I'm going and we don't know when we're coming back. Like it's a definite amount of time. And I do want to enjoy my time there with my husband and my daughter to create, these memories for when we look back. And so a part of me and part of that is what does the business look like? Like, is it going to look the same as it's looked like here in the States? And one of the thoughts that I've had, and that's why I'm saying that you're picking up, Darla, is like maybe I could collaborate with other retreat hosts
Mm.
where we either do a retreat together or I scout it out or, and like
Mhm.
do my own first retreat there and maybe like white label it, like the setup or something. Like, I don't know what it looks
Ooh.
like, but
When you
yes,
said
we
white
can just
label it, yeah,
maybe
feels nice in my body.
let's do something,
Maybe
Darla.
it's
Let's
just
create
for
some
me. Maybe
magic.
it's what you're going to do. I love it.
We can create some
Yeah.
magic there.
Gosh, you said, what life do I really want to live? And I think when we think about money magic and we think about increasing your income, y- for me, going from corporate into having my own business, I would say I still every year have like a revisiting of what does freedom look like? How could I create more of what I really want rather than where have I fallen into assumptions of what work has to look like? What advice would you have for someone who wants to increase their income, make money from their gifts, and really wants a lifestyle business?
Well, I love that term, lifestyle business. I do consider myself that I've created a life by design. And that's for everyone to really do, but it's going to require certain things, like what we were talking
Yeah.
about before, there's sacrifices, there's getting uncomfortable, with certain things, you might have to invest in courses, you might have to invest in coaches. I'd say look to other people that are already doing this,
Mm.
that have those results that you're looking for. If it's the digital nomad lifestyle, find a mentor that's already doing the digital nomad lifestyle. If it is retreats, if you just want to be a retreat host and that's what you want to do, then find yourself someone that's teaching this and follow those footsteps. And and I think the most important is what you said that you do every year is going back and asking yourself the question like, do I have everything, and am I doing and am I being everything that I want to be that are aligned with my values? I mean, freedom happens to be one of my core values too, top values. I like being able to pick up and go wherever I want, do whatever I want. And some people might look at it like, oh, well, you have it easy because you work from home or you get, and I'm like, yeah, but I created that, like I did
Yeah.
leave corporate, and you can do that too if you want to. You just have to put a strategy together and figure it out as you go. We can all do this. But the big question is to ask yourself, what do I really want? And if you do it on a yearly basis, great. If you do it on a, you know, 6-month basis or quarterly basis, that's even better. It's just like, am I on the right track? Is this in alignment with what I really want right now?
I love that. I love it. So tell me about the top 8 money mistakes women make and what to do about it. First, like, why did you develop this? And what can people expect if they go find this free gift, which we've got in the show notes?
Yes, one of the things that I realized when I went down the path of exploring my relationship with money, again, coming from patriarchy, it was like, oh no, the men will figure it out. I'm not good with numbers. Like there was just so many limiting beliefs that I had never really sat down and questioned. And so I developed this guide, it really is just like a sweet little checklist that hundreds of women have gone through, and some of them we go even deeper into my signature program. I have a signature program that's called Money Magic Miracles. We're get this, in the first cohort, we had 22 people and they manifested over $1.2 million in 60 days.
I
So
read
that's
that in your bio. That's incredible.
So there, but it starts by downloading something like this. And if it's not my guide, go find yourself something, like some of the key points in there are like, start educating yourself about money. Like they make it seem like it's so
Yeah.
hard, with all these financial terms and stuff. You don't have to start there. That's like high school level. Go get yourself a book about money and spirituality, for example. You could get the Four Spiritual Laws of Prosperity by Edwina Gaines. You could get Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It was written, over a century ago. You just read. I'm looking at my bookshelf, the science of getting rich, Wallace Wattles, also 100 years ago, like if that seems too daunting, of like, oh, I don't know what all these
Mm.
terms are, then start with something softer, but start educating yourself about money. And then, because it's so important, especially for women. I'll just give you some stats of why it's so important. 50% of marriages will end up in divorce. If you're on the lucky side that you're still in partnership or in a marriage, and that 50% of those women, 80% will outlive their spouses. And I've met many women that they've lost their spouses at a young age, not even like in their 80s or 90s. And then there's the other group, a smaller group of women that are choosing to be independent. They don't want to be with anyone, or maybe they're in a transition of relationships. So you have to understand your finances and your money and not count on someone's
Yeah.
going to come and save me, whether it's my son, my spouse, my whoever, my brother. Start learning and understanding money now while you're in a good space versus being in the middle of the crisis,
Yeah.
meaning the divorce, the death of your partner, whatever it is, because you cannot make a sound decisions when that's happening, and people can take advantage of you. So that's why it was important for me. I'll give you an example, Darla. Like I never knew, and here's a reminder too, we are not born knowing about money. So for all of you that are there like, oh, but I don't know, and I was never good with math, like numbers aren't my thing. The stats say that women are better investors than men, because we are not as emotionally, up and down as men, like we're more sound-headed with it. And the wealth transfer right now is getting transferred to more women, of like from baby boomers to the next generation. So I really encourage, and we give back a lot more. And so when women start understanding money and start using it for the right things, giving it to the charities that you want to give, your favorite charities, and you grab that bull by its horn, and just like start understanding it and befriend money and be like, oh my God, I want to learn how to multiply my money. And I didn't understand half of these things either. It was actually, my husband was a huge supporter when I first started learning about investing. And I encourage everyone, if you're just dipping your toes, download this guide, of the top mistakes that women make with money and how to fix them. One is getting educated. The other one is starting to pay yourself. That's another one that we don't do. We pay all our bills, but we never pay, we never put money into our own accounts to multiply that money. So I could go on and on, Darla, with the money subject.
I love it. I can feel your passion and I am excited. I just downloaded the gift, so I was reading along with you a little bit.
Thank-
Last question I like to ask. If we imagine someone at home, wherever home is, listening to this, it ends up in their earbuds and they are magical. We all have access to magic, right? But their magic is coming online. They're feeling intuitive pull to something, and nobody around them gets it. Maybe people think they're a little crazy. They're like the odd one in their family or community. What would you say to them?
Don't listen to the other ones. Just listen to yourself. I've been there. I feel for you. I completely understand that when you get an intuitive hit, or an idea, because usually those intuitions come in a form of an idea, of just like, oh my God, I should call this person or I should go do this X, Y, and Z. Know your environments and who you can share that with, like what communities, what partners. And think of it also as ideas are almost like babies, like they're just, if the idea just came today, maybe it's not the time to share with your partner, like Darla, like you were saying before, if like you knew you were going to California, but you were waiting for the right moment, it's not that you needed approval, you knew you were going to get the support, but maybe it wasn't the right moment to share that idea. We needed it to grow a little bit stronger. So the first thing I'd say is just ask yourself what stage of the gestation is that idea at? Is it a little embryo? Is it at month 2 and month 3? Like where is it at? And then the second part is pick the right people that are going to support you versus judge you with that idea, because you don't want them to squash it right away and then you just give up on it. It's like you want to be in environments that can support you and people that are going to get as excited for you with it versus someone that's immediately going to start looking and pulling out all the reasons and excuses because they're here. And here's another thing that you have to think, because sometimes those people tend to be our spouses or kids or parents and those people close to us, and they don't mean bad. But when you have an idea that involves change, people don't like forced change on them. It's like, imagine the idea is, I want to lose some weight and I'm going into this healthy lifestyle. I'm going to start going to the gym every day at 5 a.m. and I'm going to eat only veggies for, from here on moving forward. And you share that with your spouse too soon and with your kids, they're going to freak out and they're going to try and pull you back down because they don't want to change. They're thinking, what does that mean to me? Does that mean I have to wake up too? Does that mean I have to eat veggies too? So that's where I want you to just really protect that and share it in the right environments. And then when you're ready, then you can share it with those people close to you that it might require change on their part too. Hopefully that worked.
So good. I talk about when I was first getting the pull to host retreats and I was leaving corporate and I would say what I wanted to do, all it would take was someone wrinkling their nose at me and I would quit. I would
Oh,
just be like, oh, yeah, that is a bad idea. I should probably apply for a job. And, today it's like wouldn't even be a conversation. So that's such good advice to just kind of think, where is your baby? Is it ready?
yeah. And good awareness for you too, Darla, of realizing that now. It's like, oh, yeah, that doesn't faze me.
Yeah. Yeah. So fun. Tanya, thank you so much. It's so great to have you and to be able to connect with you and to be a part of this story of your new adventure. I can't wait to hear about it. If anybody listening wants a white labeled retreat in Bali, let's just say,
We're stopping
send
it.
send
Yes,
a
I love
PM
it.
and let Tanya know because I felt the magic and I'm just really, really excited for you. Thank you for being an example of what's possible in the world for people, for women, for money.
Thank you, Darla, and thank you so much for having me here.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.